We are back for another episode of Fest Forward Advisor Talks, brought to you by the Ottawa Festival Network, a not-for-profit service organization that works cooperatively with members and partners towards a vibrant, inspired, and prosperous festival capital. In this podcast series, industry experts break down hot topics in the operational and strategic areas of focus that are essential for any festival and event organization. You will hear best practices and expert advice complemented by real-world examples and lessons learned from fellow festival producers that will help you solve problems, make decisions, and realize your creative visions. In this episode, the advisors, Gina Maddalena and Cynthia Allan, are bringing you a lively discussion on the latest trends and challenges in volunteer management. Gina is a human resources professional with over 15 years of experience fulfilling organization talent management needs. She is a strategic HR business partner with one of the largest HR and payroll system providers, as well as an actively involved board member with the Italian Week Festival. Cynthia is a career development and experiential learning specialist at Career Corner over at the University of Ottawa. She brings over 20 years of experience and insight into the HR and recruitment field. Find out more information on both of these speakers and what they're up to in the episode show notes. As always, use the discussion in this podcast as general educational information and always seek out your own professional advice that can take into account your unique circumstances. Thank you to the Canada Council for the Arts for the support in the making of this podcast. Now, please enjoy and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to support this series.
So one of the biggest reasons people get involved in festivals is the opportunity to work with passionate, like-minded people. Festivals don't happen without people. Fact is, volunteers are a big part of what make festivals successful. But it's not always also can be the most difficult part of running a festival. My name is Cynthia, and I'm here with Gina Maddalena, who has over 20 years of human resources experience to talk about all the people aspects of festivals. So let's jump right in, girl. How are you doing today?
Good. Cindy, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So first of all, in your opinion, how important is it to have the right leadership and staff for the success of a festival?
Oh, absolutely key, right? We need to have leaders that can be adaptable, flexible. I mean, things at festivals happen fast and you don't have a lot of time. So you need to be able to adapt quite quickly. And festivals are often volunteer run. So you need to be able to manage volunteers, a little differently than you can employees. So having someone that's able to understand how to do that and do it well is very key to having a successful festival.
And as you said it, I mean, many times these festivals are volunteer run, volunteer driven. Can you, I mean, in the normal human resource recruitment world, you interview, you select the best candidate for the position. Is that something you would do when hiring
Mhm.
volunteers?
Absolutely. I mean, you want to make sure that you've got the right skills to meet the things that you need to get done. Because as I mentioned earlier, you're usually working on a very short timeline. So you want to make sure you've got the right skill set, you've got the right mindset of people. So that involves having an interview and asking some questions and getting to understand and know them better. So.
Can you give me some examples, maybe what some of the best practices are for volunteer interviewing?
Oh, absolutely. Just the same as any other job interview you would go through, right? And you and I have done quite a fair bit of them over our careers. So, behavioral interviewing, asking them to demonstrate examples of when they've, done some organization or whatever it is that you're looking to measure, right? So, getting examples on how they've managed different situations,
Mhm.
how they can adapt, because that is always usually a good predictor of the behavior that they're going to demonstrate again. And take lots of notes. Take your interview notes and make sure that you're interviewing either with one other person at the same time or having another person interview them as well. Because you're going to see a different perspective from the other person. And you'll want to make sure that you can align on the person that you're going to bring in.
And if I can interject, I think I know Gina and you and I have talked about this on numerous occasions. The
Mhm.
importance of choosing the right competencies.
Mhm. Mhm.
or skills. Can you talk to that? Because that often starts the process, does it not?
Oh, absolutely, right? We need to know what we're hiring for. So, what does our organization need? So, do you need someone who's got change management skills, project management skills, good communication skills? Are they going to be doing public speaking? Do they need technical skills as well? Are they going to be posting things on platforms? I mean, I can post
Mm.
a picture on social media, but I can't do any of those other fancy things. Right? So, and you wanna make sure that, those align with your festival and with your organization and with your
Yeah.
mandate, right?
So having said that, what competencies, what are kind of the general competencies required for festivals and in order to have a successful festival?
Well, I can speak from my experience of working in festivals. As you know, I'm Italian, if you can't
Hmm.
tell by my name. So I've spent a few years being involved in the Italian festival. So I would say, in terms of what skills really you need to hit the ground running, is being able to adapt very well. So
Mm,
if the weather changes from hot and sunny on a Saturday to rainy and windy on a Sunday, you need to be able to shift your scheduling, be able to run out and get raincoats at the Dollarama. Like, you're gonna need to be able to say, well, I was supposed to do this today, well, and walk in and go, well, no, today we need to do this. So making sure that people understand that they need to be able to pivot quite quickly,
mhm.
and have good communication skills. For example, when people come to a festival, they're always going to have questions.
Yes.
Where can I find the washrooms? Where can I find this? And ask questions that you may or may not know the answer to. And if you don't know the answer, that's okay. But you want to be able to communicate where you can find that answer.
Mhm.
Um, so you want to make sure that they can deliver customer service, a huge skill, right? When you're dealing with the public.
Absolutely. And I would think communication as well between members. I
Hmm.
mean, people who are able to keep the leadership team up to date on what's going on the ground, because obviously leaders can't be everywhere at once. Well, maybe you can, Gina. You tend to be able to do that, but
You want to make sure that, a volunteer or even an employee is just not sitting there not telling you what's happening, right? So you'll want to make sure that you've set the expectations with them. So understanding that this is part of your job, and if XYZ happens, you need to locate your supervisor, come tell, one of the board members what's
yeah,
going on. So yeah, definitely setting expectations and communication is very important.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's great. Now, I think a big question: where does one find volunteers? I think that's a struggle for a lot of festivals, right? Is just finding the staff. Do you have any tips on that?
Absolutely. It is very difficult, and we often see festivals are using social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook. But it's also important to build partnerships in the community. So whether it's with, the schools that we have in the community, from Algonquin to Ottawa U or Carleton, but also at the high school level, different programs, whether post-secondary or secondary, have requirements for students to do volunteer work or
Mhm.
placements. So that's always a great place. But I also encourage festivals to use LinkedIn. Professional organizations often give employees volunteer days to go into the community and do work. And they can also flip that into a sponsorship opportunity as well.
Oh,
So just looking at your resources a little differently, and knowing that, everyone always wants to give back to the community. I think we live in a very, very kind and generous community for that in Ottawa. So people are always looking at how they can support different festivals and different organizations. So I encourage people to look at different platforms. And then, of course, there's the Ottawa Festivals Network.
mhm.
They post opportunities, or can connect you to a festival if a person is interested in volunteering. And there's the JCP program. So if festivals are looking to get a more dedicated resource, they can work with the Ottawa Festivals Network for them.
A couple others that I'm aware of, that I use and to help students to find volunteer opportunities is a large organization in Ottawa called Volunteer Ottawa,
Hmm.
where you can
Hmm.
post your jobs. There's also a website called Charity Village as well that actually
Absolutely.
post both paid opportunities, if any of the festivals here have any of those
Yeah.
paid
Yeah.
work opportunities,
For sure.
as well as volunteer opportunities. So just a couple of other examples out there as well.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And networking, right? You never know,
Mm.
somebody who knows somebody who maybe has a child that they'd like to see more active outside of the house. Uh, or someone in their family who might be interested. So you never underestimate your network. That's for sure.
um, let's get into maybe a kind of a little bit more difficult topic, conflict. Okay.
Sure.
It comes with any organization. I think with
Hmm.
any time that there are more than two people or more than one person, I should say, you're going to have conflict. So, what about conflict, let's say within a board? There can be many reasons for it, of course.
Hmm.
Personal agendas, strong personalities, conflicting priorities.
Hmm.
How best to address conflict in these types of situations?
Well, at the board level, I strongly recommend having policies and procedures in place.
Mm,
Your board, most of the time they're non-for-profit, so they're governed by non-for-profit. So having good health and safety policies, and when I say health and safety, I don't mean wearing the right shoes or or learning how to lift. It's about our mental health as well. So
mm,
having respect in the workplace policies for violence and harassment, a volunteer charter for your volunteers that outlines again the expectations of their behavior, code of conduct, a code of ethics.
mm.
So people have an expectation of what the behaviors are and how they align to your values as an organization, and where they can go when they have conflict. If two board members don't agree on something, there should be at least a third person that they can go to have that discussion to help understand, different perspectives. Two sides to every story, and somewhere in the middle, there's the truth.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure that they can have an open discussion and respect each other's opinions, because everybody's got an opinion and it's going to be different,
Yes.
right or wrongly. So, so just again, it all comes down to, having the right processes and policies in place, communicating them and the expectation, and following through. So, you may get to a point as a board member if you're continually having conflict or you're not aligning to other people's thinking. It may not necessarily be a conflict. You may need to assess and say, is this the right place for me?
Mm,
Is this where I need to be? Am I adding any value to this organization? And the organization, may have to do the same, right? Um, there's always that, can you fire a volunteer? Well,
yeah.
if if you're not aligned and things aren't working well, we all do volunteer work because we want to contribute and feel good. So when that stops happening, I think we need to recognize that and move on for sure.
That's really interesting. Now, when there is conflict on a board, let's say between two members,
Hmm.
um, is it important? Should there be the board or team involvement, or really should it remain within the individuals and having them, work their way through it?
Well, best practices, you always try to work things out yourselves first. And it all depends, right? What is the nature of the disagreement,
Mm,
and how they can resolve it. So if they come to an impasse and they can't agree, then maybe they need to engage another board member to help them through that.
okay. And what about, I mean, and I'm sure this can happen sometimes, is what if there's a conflict that's actually preventing the organization of the event to move forward? That there's a little bit of a kind of standstill, that nothing's moving forward. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, again, I think it depends, right? If there's something that's impeding the festival from moving forward, then someone has to make a decision. Obviously, there's either going to be a president of the board or an executive or director that has that authority.
Hmm.
So you hope it doesn't get to that, but at some point, you need to make a decision and move on. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you talked about part of that is having that formal process in place. before
Yeah.
these things happen.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, with regards to that and having policies and procedures, HR policy and procedures, I mean, all of us work for various organizations that we're all aware of them. We're all familiar with
Mhm.
them. But if you are, a new festival or a well-established festival that maybe have never considered having these things in place, where does
Mhm.
one start? Is there a place to find resources to kind of guide you to put these policies and processes into place?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can definitely talk to the Ottawa Festivals Network, and ask them for resources.
Hmm.
I'm gonna say, um, probably something we all do is you Google it. I mean, there
Mm.
are tons of resources online to help you write policies. You can reach out to an HR professional like myself. We're always looking for volunteer opportunities and happy to help in the community. But even from a health and safety perspective, the Ontario government has those policies and templates online that you can
Oh.
adapt to your organization. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, wow, that's great. That's great.
Mhm.
So it's certainly you're not left out there, even if you don't have someone like you, an HR specialist on the
Mhm.
team. There certainly sounds like there's tons of resources out there. So that's good.
And you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? Some chances are someone's already done that, and it's easy to adapt.
Are there any other, kind of what you would say important maybe policies or procedures that should be outlined maybe and be a little bit more formal for festivals in order to have a successful festival and to prevent issues, hopefully.
A volunteer charter.
Mm.
So you're bringing on these volunteers. We want to set the expectation, their behaviors, what's available from a health and safety perspective, the level of confidentiality that you expect
Oh.
for them as well. And what I always find goes hand in hand with HR is finance. So you want to make sure that you have those financial processes and policies in place. If a volunteer needs to go out and buy something for the festival, they're going to be reimbursed. That shouldn't be an expectation that they have to pay for that. So what does that look like? When is it appropriate to do that? Um, so understanding who can spend money and who can't, or how money is spent, is very important. And those are a lot of guidelines that different grant funding uh, guidelines or requirements present themselves to as well. So you want to make sure you've got good, solid people policies in place and good, solid financial policies in place.
That's great. I wouldn't have thought of the finance side, but you're right. Those
Yeah.
are things that I'm sure come up for festivals a lot.
Hmm.
Like going out and buying those rain ponchos at Dollarama
Hmm.
at the last minute.
Absolutely.
Those
Absolutely.
kind of things. That's great, great, very good point. What about so we talked about, firing, not firing or letting volunteers go or
Mhm.
staff. How do you manage? Let's talk about performance management a little bit and
Yeah,
managing
sure.
performance of individuals who are saying, "Hey, I'm giving my time for free," and so they and in some cases they might have to do certain hours in order to graduate from high school or those kind of
Hmm.
things, and
Hmm.
maybe they're not giving their best performance. How do you
Right.
manage performance, or what are some great tips to manage performance in these cases?
So again, understanding the role and the expectations. So, what they've signed up for, having and good job descriptions, a good outline of this is what you're coming on board to do, this is the expectation, and having regular touch points with people. So just because they're
Mm.
volunteers doesn't mean you shouldn't check in with them. You don't, have to check in with them every day or once a week, but having a regular cadence where you're checking in, making sure that they understand what they've been asked to do, that they're doing it well, and ensuring that if there's any obstacles for them, that you're there as the leader to remove those for them, right? So, and giving feedback and good coaching to anyone is always appreciated, right? If they're going in the wrong direction, you want to make sure that you can catch that and give them guidance as they need it. So just making sure there's that ongoing touch point and communication with volunteers, I think is really important for managing their performance. If you want to, if you want to reference it as performance management for
Mhm.
sure.
Well, and it's so important, and some festivals, of course, have hundreds of volunteers. Is there an easier way, or have you discovered in your experience of making sure all the volunteers are informed, or that
Mhm.
that kind of thing? Do you have any tips on that to make sure everyone's on the
Yeah,
same page and
yeah, for sure.
know what the goal is?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that we had done with the Italian festival, I mean, we didn't have hundreds of volunteers. Nothing, I'm sure, as big as the machine that Blues Fest runs. But we did volunteer orientation.
Mm.
So we brought everybody in, gave them a lay of the land of what the festival was going to look like. We had posted job descriptions that people could um, apply to or show their interest in, so that they knew what they were going to do,
Okay.
and we made sure that they had a package of the information that they needed. And then we would, before I'll call it a shift would start, we'd make sure that the volunteers had an understanding of what they needed to do. And then throughout the weekend, we would check in with them. Do you have what you need? Do you have any questions? So again, just making sure that there's always that constant communication with them.
Mhm. Oh, that's great. Yeah, volunteer orientation, of course. I mean, we orient new employees, so that makes
Absolutely.
sense. That makes sense. And if it does get to the point that, perhaps, a volunteer or, a board member or a staff member is um, maybe not contributing how they should and even perhaps detracting from the operation of the festival,
Mhm.
do you have any termination tips, for
Oh, termination tips.
Yeah, I know, for this kind of thing.
So if they're an employee that you've hired, whether that be through the JCP program, or on a contract because you have funding, I mean JCP, that's run through the festival and through a third party, so you need to make sure that they're informed of what the action is that you want to take and how you want to take it and the reasons why. But typically, if you're having an employee and there's a contract in place, you'll want to make sure you have a good termination clause. So that says, if you're not performing, we can terminate and then set the guidelines of what that termination looks like, whether it's with pay based on the employment standards to make sure that that's all aligned. From a volunteer perspective, you still want to provide that courtesy, right? Giving them that feedback, and then letting them know that you would no longer need them to participate. So you still want to have that conversation. You still want to give that feedback. It's unfortunate. People may agree or may disagree with that outcome, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind that you need to do what's best for the festival and the safety of the festival.
Mhm. So it sounds like, in order, and very much what you've mentioned overall about human resources, whether it be the recruiting or conflicts, sounds like being proactive and trying to anticipate things in advance before they happen seems like a
Mhm.
successful strategy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no one can predict. We don't have a crystal ball. But that's where that interview process comes into play, right? You're going to see different behaviors and communicate with them, and those may raise some, things that you just want to keep an eye on. Like I said, having two people in the interview process always gives you two different perspectives.
Mhm.
So you want to be able to, again, have those policies and procedures in place so that if something goes left instead of right, that you know how you need to react.
And we're almost at the end of our time. So Gina, do you have any final advice or things we
Mhm.
haven't touched on that you would like to talk about?
I think final advice, and we covered a lot, which is great. You had thanks for the question, Cindy. But I think kind of just back to what we were saying, having good policies in place, good procedures in place, making sure that you have good documentation, whether it's job descriptions, interviews, conversations that you've had with people regarding their performance and expectations. Again, volunteer or employee, all the same.
Mm.
So it takes a lot of effort, but it also helps relieve a lot of stress because they're not easy conversations to have if they're not if they need to be constructive. So you want to make sure that you've set yourself up to be successful.
I love that. Love that. As you have been with the
Oh,
festivals you
too
have been
kind.
involved in. So thank you so much, Gina, for all this wonderful advice. It was a pleasure for me to be here and to learn from you. Look forward to the next episode.
Great. Thanks, Cindy.
And that wraps up this episode of Fest Forward Advisor Talks, presented by the Ottawa Festival Network. All of the resources and links mentioned throughout this episode will be available in the episode show notes, as well as transcriptions in both French and English. For information on OFN and our members, please visit us online at ottawafestivals.ca. And if you have any questions or feedback related to this podcast, please send us an email at festforward@ottawafestivals.ca. Thank you so much for listening, and please remember to subscribe to this podcast to catch future episodes, where we will dive into even more hot topics festival and event organizations need to know to grow and support their organizations. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues and leave us a review. That's all for now. Stay tuned and stay festive.